Hello, 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 everyone there. How's everyone doing today? We're just about to get started. Hopefully, everybody can hear me okay. And it's only day 2. It is just amazes me how Linux is taking over a lot of the server infrastructure. I go ahead a little. My name is Jamal Barnes, obviously. And yesterday I created a music video. I'm just gonna move this over. If I can get this over back over there. So stop. So I'm just doing some adjustments here. How's everyone doing the second day of the I call it the road to RHCA training? How's everyone doing today? I know it's only about 7:20 in the morning here at the in the home lab, but we're just sort of getting started, and I wanted to go over a few things. So, how's everyone doing? I hope you all are excited. I did sort of mention this yesterday to a few people that the Red Hat training is going to get more difficult as the weeks and the months and the years go by. So it's gonna get a little more advanced. It's not gonna be easy. It's gonna start off pretty easy, but it's not going to be it's not going to be easy all the time. So I want to sort of just reiterate that for starters. So I'm going to let's bring up the terminal box, because you're going to see this pretty much on a daily session, so to speak. You're going to see this quite often. You're going to see this terminal pretty much every day. Okay, that's like the meat and the bones of Linux, and as far as Red Hat and just in general, I would say about 80 to 90% of the commands are pretty much can be used in any distribution of Linux, and even to some extent, if you're using a Mac, a lot of the commands do actually work in Mac, oddly enough. So I'm just going to start to reiterate that. The other thing that I wanted to mention about is for those who are planning to go the RHCA route. I kind of mentioned this yesterday, that you do have to pass 5 specialty exams, and I wish I would have yesterday kind of explained it in a little more detail how you go about getting to those exams, which ones you want to take. So like I'm gonna move this over here, and if you go into the redhat.com website, you're going to see me kind of sort of refer to this pretty often, and go under training and resources, and then select all exams, all certifications, I should say. But if you scroll all the way down here, you see how they even have a Red Hat Certified Architect, but I would sort of disregard that and just focus on getting 5 specialty exams. And you can choose from out of this list. These are the current certifications that they have on the list that are still in support. And so the ones that I'm going to focus on, my RHCA is definitely, we need to finish up this one. This RHCSA is super important. Then after that, depends on how we do on April 28th. Come May, the first week of May, we'll go into RHCE, which will go into Ansible. At that point, you're starting to go into Ansible. Then we're going to start to switch gears a bit, and the roadmap that I had for the first specialty exam out of this list is I like the I'm going to go into Ansible Ansible best practices, and so this was a super important one, and it used to be on this list, but I think, just trying to see if I can find it, but I think they have changed it. It used to be 447. Now they have retired some certifications since I last did this journey. And if you look at Ansible automation, this one 407. This is one of the ones that had expired a while back. But you can go through and search which ones you wish to do out of verifications by technology, and there's a boatload of them. But the main one, the first one I'm going to focus on after RHCE is going to be this one over here, Ansible best practices. I want to start to build on this Ansible piece because I think that is super important. A lot of automation there. It's a lot about deployments and things like that. We'll get to that. But each one is going to get more and more difficult. And stuff's going to look more and more advanced. So that's why I said we should try to start with the easier stuff first and work our way up to that list. We'll get into Red Hat virtualization. We're going to get to each of these. That's my goal. The next year is to get through each of them. But this is where on that long list of Red Hat certifications, there's a boatload. There's quite a boatload, and there's a lot of them that there's certain ones that kind of tailor towards when you start getting into Kubernetes and containers. Like you see this exam right over here, it's going to start getting into the cloud space. So there you go. Alright, so let's get started. I'm going to close out of this. This is only day 2. So why don't we do this? I'm going to show you all something that I normally do before we go to bed because I virtualize almost everything. One of the things I highly recommend for your exam is to prepare for the exam is to have a couple VMs. As I showed showcase this yesterday, I have about 2 or 3. I do plan to add a couple more VMs later on. So I wanted to get a second VM. But what I want to go over is some simple stuff. And one of the things that is starts out with is for those I'm starting out with those who may have never done Linux or have never even touched a Linux box ever before in their lifetime. One of the things you want to get familiar with is this command called cat. Cat is basically allows you to view what's in a file. It just allows you to read what's in a file essentially. So let's say for instance I wanted to go into my documents. Say I want to go into documents folder, right? Give just a prime example. So you can go to CD, obviously. That's home directory. By the way, for those of you who've never done Linux before, this symbol there is just another way of saying home directory. And then CD is change directory. If you used a Linux machine or a Mac machine before, CD is pretty much change directory. That is still the same command. And then this documents folder, which is my documents folder in my home directory. So if we go inside of there, I'll show you also in a moment what's actually in a typical home directory. But if you go into, I go inside my documents folder, ls-al is a code word for which lists the files that are in your directory. It tells you everything that's in there in a directory. Of course, I have multiple different directories. If you see anything that's in blue, as you see over here, this blue means that it's a directory. You can also tell, which we'll get into later on, this section, because I think that's very important. We'll go into this section a little later when we get into file permissions. But for starters, just note that this is, if it's in blue, 9 out of 10 it's a directory. The stuff in white means that there's a these are just regular text files. So for example, if I wanted to check to see what's in a file, so I'll just use file.txt for example. So we'll just do cat file.text, and if you notice, nothing came up. Well, you're probably wondering, well, why did nothing came up? Well, the reason that nothing came up is because of one simple reason, and that one reason is because there's nothing in that file whatsoever. There's nothing in there. So that's one way you can tell. Now, you can do a lot more with cat than what I just did there. I could have done, if you really want to get granular with cat, just do a man. Just say man cat. And what it'll tell you, it'll give you different parameters. The one parameter I tend to use from time to time is capital A. If you specify that, that shows everything. -N tells you the number of lines you want to specify, how many lines of that file you want to showcase, and it's actually which sort of narrows it down by a number of lines, because some documents can get really lengthy, and you'll see this as you go into the different config files and things like that. But that's one of the things I normally see. So like for instance, I'll show you another file. So we'll say CD. Just remember, we just discussed earlier, that's just to change the directory to scripts. Now if I do an ls ALH, by the way, because I noticed I added an H basically stands for if you want to see how much space is on per file. A is sort of in alphabetical order. A is alphabetical order, and L is, it shows it in a list format when you do ls, which goes back to what files you have. Again, if you want to see how you can get granular with this command, like ls, just do a man ls, and it'll give you different things you can do with ls and all of that. So it's very cool. If you set it as a -D, like for example, it'll show like the list of directories themselves, but not the contents of those directories. So it'll show you that information there. Let's click Q for quit. So that's pretty important. Now, another command you'll see is one of the ones you will see sometimes is this one, which is head. And all head does, which by itself is not going to do anything, but let's say I want to do cat VM create, right? It'll show me exactly what's in there. But you see, see how it shows everything, and you see how that document is very lengthy. It's very lengthy, even though it's a script that I wrote a while back. But notice that, actually, let me move this over. Over a little. So you see how I wrote all this, but you notice how the document is so lengthy. It's just very lengthy. If you do I pipe that over to head, you could do it a couple ways. One, you could do it as tac. Oh, by the way, if you use this command, which is tac, the same thing. It's basically, it just functions the exact same way as cat, but in reverse. So that's one of the main differences between cat and tac. Tac is just cat in reverse. Now, if I want to narrow down how many lines it is in a file, all I do is just do a, let's say I wanted to pipe it down to about a certain amount of lines. That I could use head or I can use tail. What tail does is, I'll show you what it really does by default. It only shows, as you can see there, it's only showing the last 10 lines of that script that I wrote. That's all it does. It just shows you the last 10 lines by default. If I switch that over to head, it only shows the first 10 lines by default. However, you can go through and specify if you want how many lines from the top or from the bottom that you want to showcase. So if I set this to -n, let's say 20, what it's going to show is the first 20 lines of that particular document or that text file. Okay, so that's one of the key differences between head and tail. Tail does the same thing, but just at the bottom, last 10 lines, but you can specify how many lines if you want more than 10. So that's the beauty of Cat in a Nutshell. There is a text editor. There's actually two. There's two text editors. One of them is Nano, which I don't really use much at all. And the reason I don't, I just find that Nano, I have to type in. It's easier for many people. Many people find Nano to be easier. Me personally, I find it to be a little bit more extra buttons I had to press to exit out of things. So, like for example, if I go back into that script again to try to make a changes. So this is what it looks like in Nano. And again, here's my issue. So you see how at the bottom it gives you the different options you can choose to write out and things like that. Me personally, I'm more biased towards Vim, and you'll obviously use Vim. You're going to see me use Vim throughout this training. But I typically use Vim because Vim, I just find it much easier to exit out of things. So, like, for example, this is up arrow X, which is Control X, which then allows you to exit out of whatever you're editing into. And now, what happens if I do Vim on that same script? Okay, so this is the how the script looks like in edit version. Again, if I wanted to write something, I just tap I, and if I tap I, now notice when I set this script up, I used it with sudo, which we'll get into later when it comes to admin rights and permissions. But this file is a read-only file, and that's because I've created this using root. Now, but you don't have to necessarily use root to create a file. It just depends on what you're trying to get that script to accomplish. So, we'll get into scripts a little later in a separate video on how these scripts work in a nutshell. So, I'll go ahead. I'm going to press escape. So, the way you exit out of files in Vim, just hit escape, and then just do semicolon QA exclamation point, and then press enter, and that brings you right back to the main terminal. Now, if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to make changes on that script, I'm going to go to sudo because this is how I originally did it. If I go, so I do sudo, and then I vim into it, I tap an I, and all I do is just put a period here. If I want to make a couple changes. So I press there, and then I do a escape if you want to make a change. So I just press escape first, then I do semicolon WQ exclamation point, and that basically allows you to save any changes that you created if you have permissions to make changes to this file. Alright. Now, so that takes care of. Now also, if you want to get trained onto Vim, on how Vim works, which I prefer Vim over Nano any day of the week, just type in Vim tutor and then press enter. And what it does is essentially is going to bring up this screen, and what And it goes very, very lengthy, but it basically gives you a tutorial on how Vim works to a T. Everything you need to know about Vim, how you can manipulate it, how to make changes, inserting text, and all that stuff. So it's very cool. So it's a very cool tool. I would say definitely refer to this because there's a boatload of things that you can do with Vim. And I just find Vim much easier to exit out of things. But that's Vim in a nutshell. The other thing that I wanted to show you all that I find to be very important is the grep command. So let's say I wanted to find out just a little term that I want to see. So first I want to do cat VM create, and then pipe. You can do up to about 3 pipes. By the way, you can pipe it up the head and pipe it up to this, or whichever, or however you want to pipe the document through to kind of nail down what you're looking for. But let's say I just want to look for, actually we'll do something a little different. Let's do, I'll tell you what, let's do mount. Just using this as an example. So mount, grep, license. That usually manipulates it. But first I wanted to do tail. Grab which one? Red wildcard. And what it does is essentially it's coded. What it did, I piped the tail, last 10 lines, and I also just went through and grabbed it over to red, and it kind of narrows anything with red and anything afterwards. So it narrows down exactly what I'm looking for at any given time and at any given moment. So that is that grep works. There's a lot of things I can do with grep. Again, if you want to see how grep works, honestly, just go to man grep. There's also egrep, and there's fgrep as well. But they pretty much function very similar. And you could get in really granular with a lot of these different ways of narrowing down exactly what you're looking for if you want to. So this is very, very cool, very, very unique, and very, very useful. The other thing I need to mention, I should probably mention this, and we're going to go back to documents, right? So we'll go back into our home directory. And by the way, if you want to see what directory you're in, just type in pwd, which is abbreviated for print working directory. As you can see, I'm in my home directory. So it helps for you to keep track of what directory you're in when you're trying to do stuff in case you forget or what have you. Just make sure you're in the right working directory. Now, if I do an ls, this is what's in my home directory. Some of these I actually put in myself, but the ones that come default are these. So I'll show you guys something. So I'm going to bring up a VM actually. So right now, so I'm going to go ahead and start up that VM at the top. Actually, we'll bring up debug now. I'll explain what it sort of looks like. And actually, let's do it in RHEL. Yeah, let's just do it in RHEL. Start 8 VM1, and then do up arrow. Which up arrow, just like in Windows or Mac, it takes you to the previous command you just typed in. All right. So what I'm doing is -viewer -if, which is full screen. Which when we get into KVM, I'll explain more about how it really works. We're gonna really save KVM for when I get into scripts. And I'll explain I will explain exactly why I'm saving KVM for when we get to scripts. For good reason. So let's F1, and then let's see if we can bring this one over So this is what the VM looks like in KVM. So I'm going to just make this full screen. Okay, just sort of just make this full screen, and I'm just going to type in my username that I created and password. So this is a VM I created, right? So remember I said let's see what's in our home directory by default. So this is what it's going to look like. So as you can see, you have your desktop folder, that directory, you have your documents folder, downloads folder, music folder, pictures, public, templates, and videos. This is literally essentially the user's profile on a Linux machine. And all these ones right up here, like .bash_profile, .bash_logout, all that stuff, that is if you want to make changes to what the user sees when they first log in. That's exactly what that all relates to. We'll get into those more when we start getting into users and permissions. But this is super important. Again, this is all basic stuff. So that is a typical user's home directory. Now, can they create new directories? Yes, they certainly can. You could certainly make new directories. But this is what it's going to look like by default. Okay, and if you want to go into CD, or just do. Here's the other thing too. If you're already in a directory, you can just do. You do not have to put what I usually do, which is I usually do this home directory /desktop. You do not have to do that. If you're already in a directory, you can just type in the name of the directory you need, and there you go. And as you can see, there's nothing in there. And if you want to go a little grander on what's hidden, just do it as list. Again, there's nothing in there. So there's absolutely nothing in that folder. One of the things you're probably wondering is, why is it that my host is running a GUI and this is not running a GUI? You're probably wondering to yourself why that is. Well, we'll get into getting this installed, which we'll go into that probably tomorrow. I'm going to explain something to you all about the difference between the graphical user interface of Red Hat and the command line interface, which is what you see on a server machine, what you see on a Linux server. This is exactly what you're going to see. This is exactly what it's going to look like. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So that is super, super important. I always said this. If you want to go into how to do something, just like I said, look at that command page. You can use info on that command if you want. There is another way of going about it. Now, I just so happen to set up on this machine. Now, if you want, by the way, to answer folks' questions about can you install a graphical user interface from here? Yes, you can, but that's not what's typically done. You can. But the way you do this, and I'm going to go into my little spiel here. If this was, I'll install it in a home lab environment. You can put in a graphical user interface if you want. But in a production environment, for security reasons, me personally, I'd never set up a graphical user interface for Linux unless I absolutely have to, because of hacks and all these other different cybersecurity issues that are going on out in the wild, which is why I normally don't prefer you would do it that way. But if you wanted to install a graphical user interface, and this is post installation, if we go into DNF group list, again, this is all base level stuff. And you'll probably see this on an exam if you want to. I'm just going to give you a synopsis if you want to do it. If you really want to install the graphical user interface, first thing I just do is sudo, because I'm not signing as root, which we'll get into a little later. What the root account does and what my regular user account has by default. So if we do this group list hidden, it's going to show you everything. all the different tools. As you can see, it gives you a lot of different tools. But one major thing, I could actually make this. This is what kind of goes back to earlier when I was saying that we really want to narrow down what we're looking for. So if we want to put, do this and just do grep, say we wanted to use workstation. And so, see how I narrowed it down? What workstation options I have? That's the beauty of grep, is you can narrow down what exactly you're looking for. So workstation, if you install workstation, we'll sort of, I'll show you this, how you can install the graphic user interface. And then what I'll do tomorrow is I'll explain how you would go about removing it. So, say we wanted to install the graphical user interface. And this is, again, this is post installation. You can set this, which is why, as you will see tomorrow, when we install a special copy of it, it will not have, you do not have to install those features at the very beginning of the installation. That is a misconception that a lot of people have. Only install what you need. If you're coming from Windows Server, you all know where I'm going with this. So, let's say for instance, I'm going to install the graphical user interface. Group install workstation. You can do it with quotes. I'm going to do it without, because there's no spaces there. And then -Y, which basically means to force it through. Okay? One of the things that is on the exam, one of the objectives on the exam is to know how to install different packages, which is what we're doing right now. This is one way to install a package. But this comes standard on your Red Hat subscription, or your Red Hat license. So press Y, press enter, and what it's going to do is a bunch of different packages. Once this gets installed, this is just a workstation. You do have the option to install the server version with a GUI to this, but we're not going to do it. I'm just demonstrating how you can, kind of goes back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, where you can narrow down what you want to do, and if you want to do something post installation, this is one of the ways that you can go in and do it. But if you go into a production environment, you're not going to see this graphical user interface, and I'm going to show you. This is exactly what it looks like in a GUI environment if you really want to have graphical user interface. Is it more user friendly than macOS? I would totally say yes. It's a little easier, but don't neglect the command line. That command line is the terminal is very, very powerful. It's a very, very powerful tool. So this usually takes about a good 5 minutes to install. So that's what it basically does. I'm just going to move this a little bit up higher so you can see how far we are in the installation process. So this is if you want to install. There are a couple other ways you can install them, and we'll get to that a little more tomorrow. But I just want to show you, if you want to install the graphical user interface back onto a machine, this is the route you would take. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and just type in reboot. Okay. So what it's doing is I'm rebooting this server. Not this. I'm rebooting this machine. Just give it a few moments. And then, because I did something a little special here, all I got to do is there's an easy way I can switch it up to the graphic user interface. Are you ready? Alright, so let's go ahead and log in. Alright, so right now we're over here. Now, the way you would switch this, we'll go into a little more detail as we get into System D and System CTL stuff. We'll get into that a little later. But I just want to show you how you can switch it to this. System CTL, set as default, graphical .target. And I'll just put... And by the way, if you have multiple accounts on a machine, multiple admin accounts, you can actually select the account and then I'll just type in my name and password, and then do a reboot. Which, by the way, I just want to make a iteration there. By default, so you sue system CPL, get as default. This is one of those things where you have to kind of do some little troubleshooting. But system, let's see what's installed. Group. Okay. So it did install the workstation, but let's do this. See if this will work. By the way, I sort of intended to get this to work. What it's supposed to do. This again, things can go wrong, as you probably can tell. On a real world environment, things can always go wrong. So if isolate that target, reboot there. All right. So that takes sort of takes the place of this. Okay, that's that. Sometimes it doesn't always work, but if you look over here, and I'll show you, I'm just going to go back to the host for a second, because if we look over here, if you look over this side, and you do DNF group list, about the hidden pathway, see how it has workstation, and it has that custom, it looks like a custom operating system. This is where you'll see that this is what's available, that's what's installed. So now, if let's say I want to make this, see how it says that environment group server with a GUI interface. Now let's go back into the virtual machine. But this is how it's supposed to work, is when you install that workstation server group, it's supposed to go ahead and bring you up to the GUI, graphical user interface, which it brings you into that system. One other thing that I should probably mention, let's go back into our virtual machine, and I'll show you what I mean by this, and the way it's supposed to work, which I'm not sure why it's not going to the graphical user interface the way it should be. So let's say, for instance, let's say DNF group list. Let's see if it is that. This is all, by the way, all of this is going to be relating to the objectives on the RHCSA. It's all tied in. One of the objectives on the exam is making sure that everything works on reboot. I wish I could sort of reiterate this. If you want to look at, I'm going to do something real quick. Set as default rescue .target. What this basically means is, sometimes I have to sort of play around with it. Target, and now it's pointing up to rescue. So if we do a reboot now, I'm going to show you the behavior of what happens. Now rescue is basically if I want to switch this in safe mode. Essentially, if you're coming from a Windows machine, it's basically safe mode with no networking whatsoever. So that's what this basically is. And you see how I just switched over into this is a Control D, and it takes you into rescue, into rescue mode. I can always change it, but what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to go into this and actually. I'm trying to troubleshoot you here to see why the graphical interface is not switching. So there's that. Just give it a few moments, see if it switches over. Sometimes it takes a little bit, sometimes it takes about 2 to 3 minutes. But this is basically rescue mode, which is essentially bare bones. When things go wrong, you can troubleshoot from here. We'll go into it in more detail in a future video. But I think for the most part, I'm gonna try and see if I can reboot this. Let's give you this. Now. So that's basically what this is. This is essentially the default target file. And what it's supposed to do, if I can get into it, which I'm going to put this aside for now. But last thing I want to get into that we'll get into today, and it's coming tomorrow. I'll explain what happened with the with our virtual machine. But this is what it's going to look like if this works well. There is a way you could actually go into and make this graphical thing even more persistent than set-default, which we'll go into tomorrow. Just going to reiterate this. Another basic command. We're just having a little fun in the lab. But one of the things that's a basic command is this one. Make dir. Okay? Make dir -p is, so right now, if you do a pwd, we're in a home directory. So this is what I want to do. I'm going to make a directory within this home directory. Call this tests. Okay? Now, notice sometimes it depends on who owns that directory. We'll get into that a little later. But sometimes you might get this error that says, the error message is going to say operation not permitted. It basically means you don't have full permissions to, as a user, to that directory. And only the owner can provide you permissions to that directory. So now, you could do make dir -p and then test, which basically means if you put it as -p, it basically means it's a parent directory. It's just that's all it is. It's just a parent directory, which I find to be much easier. If you look at the man pages, it only gives you like a couple different commands. The only one that's really important to me really is -p. This is the only one that's super really important, which is fine. So that's pretty that's important in a nutshell. Make dir. That's how you make directories. If we want to copy cd test, as you can see, if I do an ls-layout right now, there's nothing. It's absolutely nothing in that directory whatsoever. There's absolutely nothing there. If we want to copy files over, you just do CP. Now I normally do /RV, which R stands for recursive, V stands for verbose, and then all I'm doing is I can just copy documents, scripts, and then the test, right? Alright, and as you can see, when you press enter, you see how these create the, that's what this does. This basically essentially creates these files over, and it just shows you that hey, these files actually copied over, and V is for verbose, so it actually shows you what's going on, which I like. Now, another way that I see people do this when they're copying files is if they're already in the directory. So I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to remove it. So to remove the test directory, CD, go back, and all I'm going to do is just remove it, -RF, and then test. Okay, so that then removes the directory. So now, if you go to AL, notice that directory that we created is no longer there. Okay, so that's one of the things that how the remove works. Now, if you do this command, I feel sorry for you. If you do this command on that home directory, it's going to wipe everything. It's going to kill your machine. So don't do it. If you want to keep your machine, don't do it. You're going to kill and destroy your computer, and you'll probably be crying the blues trying to find how to get your files back. Don't do it. So that is how you remove one. Now, if I wanted, this is another one that I see people do. This is another way you can copy files over if you're already in that directory. So let's say you're already in this directory. Just do what is it? CP. Almost blank for a second. But do documents scripts. With that dot, you probably wonder what that dot is. That dot is synonymous with a current directory, and it does the same thing. Same thing as what I just did before. The only difference is we just use a dot to specify the current directory that you're already in. That's basically what it is. Now, can you do it in reverse from your current directory over to something else with that same command, that same dot symbol? Absolutely. Now, if I want to rename a file in here, you've got to do it as it's the move. Believe it or not, now you can move directories over. Just use move. Let's go back a couple. Let's do man move MV, which is to move files over. Now, this is so this gives you some specifications on what exactly you can do with the move command. But basically, so if you want to move, let's say I want to move the test directory. Hash T is your target directory, and you want to move it to documents. Okay, so now to verify that it's in there, just change directory to that, and just do ls. And what that basically is see how it shows you that test directory is now in the documents folder. Now, if I want to make the rename it, I actually have to do move documents. If I want to rename this, I just do that test one and just rename it to -documents home directory /documents /test2. Okay, so now if I want to do this, you see I just renamed it over here, as you can see right down here, to test2. So that is how you rename directories, rename a directory or a file, and it's using the move command. That's all it is. move is pretty much the same for renaming a file, which is ironic. What else I should probably mention about? If you want, now this command here, this is another basic one, is touch, and all this does is just create a file for you to work on. That's all it does. It just creates a file. So file2.txt. That's it. And then you can do cat if you want. And then which doesn't show anything because we didn't put anything in there. We can edit the file this way. Then file2.txt. And you can then go inside of there and make changes. Or you can do echo, which allows you to add some input and then send it over. That's all that basically does, essentially. It definitely goes into echo, which echo is pretty much, I'm gonna say, we're gonna have a little fun. This take me out to the ball game. And we're just going to say, now here's a big difference. If I use just one arrow here, but not, well, actually, I shouldn't say that, a greater than symbol. If I use one greater than symbol, all it does is just, it outputs it over. But here's the big, huge difference. You guys ready? Alright, so let me show you the difference. So, let's do a cat on file2.txt. Right? See how it says, take me out to the ball game? At the bottom here. I'm just going to do this for a second. Alright, so see how it says, see how it says this right over here? Let's say we do that, we want to add a line here. This is where the issue lies. So if let's say this is a test. I just say file2.txt and then can see what's in there. Here's what happened. Probably wondering what the heck just happened here. Well, notice I'm going to use this one arrow, this one greater than symbol. What that basically means is if you use that, and let's say you wanted to add a new line, and you put that, just that one greater than symbol there, it's going to overwrite everything that's in the file. And it's going to kill and destroy all the work that you've done, all the blood, sweat, and tears that you put inside of this file. So if you want to add new lines, all you're doing, let's try this again. So let's say I wanted to add a new line. Okay. Take this, or let's say echo, I'm going to say take me out to the ball game. That's the ball game. And this basically, yeah, it's the ball game. This time, I'm going to add two greater than symbols and do the same thing that we did earlier on that file. So now, let's do a cat, shall we? Let's do a cat into this file. And notice that new line, as you can see there, has been added. So if you want to add new lines, make sure you use the two greater than symbols here. Do not just use just one, otherwise it's going to kill everything that you've done. Alright. The other thing, if I want to take something out of, basically what this symbol means is I'm taking back over. So this is basically let's see what happens if I set the ball game. This time I make it this way and file2.txt. Notice it gives you that option the way you can make a bunch of changes if you want. We're not going to do that. But let's see, I do it with just one. Clear file 2. We'll go into more about manipulation of files tomorrow. Again, this is just basic commands, basic stuff here. But that is all for what I have for today. We'll come back in tomorrow. I'll also explain what happened with our virtual machine. Hopefully I didn't destroy it. If so, I can always recreate it if I need to. But thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a great day for day 2, and we'll be back tomorrow for day 3. Have a good one.